delicatebeats.com.
Hey, what's up guys? JT here for delicatebeats.com. Today I want to show you a few tricks to fatten up those EDM drums and make them sound loud like Skrillex and Zomboy. So let's go. So here we are in Ableton Live and we are about to create some seriously loud, overcompressed EDM drums. The first tip I want to give you is to use a reference track. In this case, I have duplicated the track that I've loaded up in my Ableton set, and the first copy is going to be used as a reference, so as a comparison point. That way I can solo the track and go back and forth with my mix to compare the character and the tone and the energy. I have routed this first copy to the external out. Because I'm doing some processing on the master out, when I'm listening to the reference track, which is already mastered, I don't want these plugins to affect the sound of the reference track. So by routing it to the external out directly, you bypass these plugins. The second copy will be routed to the FabFilter Pro Q2 in on my master out. I'm using this EQ on my master out to, match somehow the characteristics of the reference track. So by sending the reference track to the frequency analyzer of my EQ, I can, get some of the same characteristics in terms of frequency on my mix and have the EQ do it automatically for me. Tip number 2 is to invest on a few good drum libraries. In this case, I'm going to be using the Terror Drums Dubstep drums by Cymatics. And by picking the right drum sounds from the start helps you really, get into music making and not so much drum tweaking. So as you can see on each of my individual drum tracks, there's little to no processing needed. I'm really just shaping the sounds a bit more with EQ, but basically from the start, these drums sound impeccable and are really, competitive and have the same energy as my reference track. Tip number 3 is to use parallel compression on drum groups. And also by creating drum groups, you can create a trigger to sidechain compress each of the other tracks, percussion tracks, as well as synth and effect tracks. So to create a group, you simply have to select with shift down the drum sounds that you want to be in the group. And what's incredible about Ableton Live is that you can also add some processing on the groups. So in this case, if I just keep the kick and snare, I'm applying parallel compression. By the way, this is a stock setting for the glue compressor in Ableton Live. It really like tames the sound and make all the drum sounds gel together. So if we listen to the drum track without the parallel compression, and by the way, notice that I'm using some extreme settings here. I'm reducing the volume by, I think, like 12 or 13 dBs, but use whatever sounds best to you. I felt like it tamed the drums so well and make them, sit in the mix so well that I just kept this extreme value. So parallel compression on the drums, and then I also have a splash cymbal here, and like I said, when you create a group, you can use the group as a sidechain trigger. So on my splash here, I'm going to A/B it, but basically the sidechain compression on the splash cymbal really makes the whole drum track come alive. You'll see. So notice how when I apply the sidechain compression, the whole track starts to move up and down. It's really fantastic. Okay, so parallel compression on the drum groups, sidechain, using the drum group as a trigger on the percussion tracks. And now let's move on to the next step. So you're already good to go in terms of getting some super loud, punchy EDM drums for your tracks. But I want to share with you a few tricks to show you the importance of carving out the rest of your track around this powerful drum mix. Let's look at one of the tracks here, which I named C, and it's basically a wave sound effect loop that I'm playing in the background just to give it a bit more, you know, texture and ambiance. So again, if we look at the processing on this particular track, you know, I'm adding reverb, EQ, I'm moving all of the frequencies, the low frequencies out so that my kick and snare have all of the room to be punchy. And then I'm using the glue compressor with sidechain compression from the drums group to move it out of the way. And finally, a multi-band compressor just to use as an effect to bring some of the high frequencies out, you know, make them present. So let's listen to the track by itself and see again the very, very extreme values for sidechain compression. I really want this track to be more of an effect track and have it jump up and down with the kick and snare. A lot of dubstep producers use crowd loops in the background just to create, you know, more hype. So this is kind of the same principle. In this case, I wanted to do something more like dreamy and soft, so I used a C sound effect. So again, it really goes back to using the drum group as a trigger for the sidechain. And next up, if we look at the chords, I created some future bass-ish synth chords, and again it's the same principle. I'm really just ducking the sound using a bit of EQ and multiband compression to move the frequencies out of the way of the drums. So hear how the drums with some very drastic sidechain compression stay untouched. They're not drowned in the rest of the mix's elements. And finally, I added a sub bass, and again, very intense sidechain compression based on the drums group going on. So for each kick and snare, the sound goes almost back to zero. And this is how you keep the drums very, very present and punchy in your EDM mixes. So to wrap up this tutorial, I'd like to show you the processing that I've got going on my master out. The first plugin is a glue compressor again, and this time I'm using really subtle values to catch the peaks. This is one of the stock settings for the glue compressor, and what that does is just reduce the volume of the transients on the drums. So let's play the track. As you can see, it catches the kick and reduces it by roughly, 2.5 dBs. And what's great about that is that even though you can't really hear it, it's going to allow me to limit the track even harder at the end, because a limiter is triggered first and foremost by the loudest peaks, and in this case the drums. And if you tame just the drums at the entry before EQing, then you can limit and make the track sound louder, basically. As you might remember, I talked about routing one of the reference tracks to the input of my EQ on the master out. And if I play the track, look at the frequency analyzer here, and you're going to see two curves, one red, one white. The red one is the reference track, while the white one is my mix. In FabFilter's Pro Q2 EQ, you can here go in Analyzer and press the EQ Match button. And what that's going to do is have the plugin analyze what kind of EQ curve you need applied to your mix to make your mix sound closer in terms of frequency to your reference track. So usually I'd have it play for a few seconds like this, so that the plugin understands enough of what's going on in the reference track as well as your mix. And then I would press the match button. In this case, I've already done that, and it creates a bunch of bells, you know, boosting and dipping at certain key frequencies. And what you can do when you get that is select all of the nodes, and the first trick I always use is make the cue broader, so that the curves are softer and it has a more musical effect. And then I usually try to make the loudest boosts around, keep them around 5 to 6 dBs. We're going to start off with, a flat curve. So starting from the rough mix, and in this case, the sweet spot seems to be plus 4 dBs before, the kick starts to distort and, some of the mids become very harsh and ear tiring. So let's just do a little before and after. Notice how the EQ really brings the track to life. It's fantastic. I cannot recommend highly enough that you start, match EQing your tracks. It's just awesome. And finally, you just have to limit the hell out of your track. I mean, in the loudness war, especially in the EDM world, it seems like there's no amount of distortion that is not unwelcomed. So what I would do is just, start to 0 and just move the gain up until it starts to distort, and just back off a bit. So you noticed around 9 the kick started to distort, and plus 7.5 dBs, which is already very, very intense, seems to be the sweet spot where it's as loud as it can possibly be without distorting. So let's just do a little comparison with the reference track to finish off the tutorial. So my track is a bit muddier. I could probably go in here, throw on a second EQ just to remove some of the 100 Hertz stuff. But basically the level is matched. I think the energy is still there. My track is not, squashed. I mean, yeah, it is squashed, but it's not, completely destroyed with the limiter, which was the goal. So mission accomplished. I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, my track is super smooth. I went in different directions with my keyboards, but I think the drums and the energy is pretty much up there with the Slushy remix. So there you have it, folks. This is how I achieve my loudest drum sounds for dubstep and EDM in general. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked the video and found it useful. You can, write questions in the comments if you didn't quite catch some of the concepts that I talked about today. And also watch the other videos. I mean, there's a bunch of little tricks for EDM that I have in my other videos. So I think they'll go hand in hand with whatever you learned today in this tutorial. And on that note, I thank you again for watching, and you have a great day. All right, peace out, guys.